But there's one place and one place only to start, Webby. And that would be our Wrap It Up segment with your Toronto Raptors, who last night's game against the Detroit Pistons was just so good on so many levels. Back and forth affair, overtime, big plays. You had Demar and Blake Griffin going toe to toe. So much going on.
What an incredible statement win from the Raptors. Now, I know that it's not necessarily as big of a deal, as this game that's coming up on Friday against the Rockets, but it seemed like one of those old school Raptors playing down to the level of their opponent, letting one get away from them, but to come storming back in the fashion that they did, and I think we're going to talk about it, but to kind of rely on the style of play that they were known for so long in terms of iso ball and relying on DeMar DeRozan, and for that to work out, I mean, it just goes to show that this team is doing it in all facets. Like, we've been praising their bench for so long that now, when that bench fails them, and listen, Van Vliet didn't have the best game. Blake Griffin was kind of abusing Pirtle and Siakam for a little while last night. But to be able to rely on something tried and true like DeRozan shows that they've got a lot of bullets in their arsenal.
You mentioned just some of the stuff that was going on in the game last night, and you're right. Van Vliet, he struggled last night, but then to come back in two things. One, for him to hit the big shot, but also for DeMar to trust him to give him the ball in that big spot as well. I think that's a big factor as well that needs to get a lot of love, because does DeMar make that play in years prior? And I don't just mean the trust factor. I just mean, does DeMar have the confidence in his game? Like, is his game at that level where he's able to create? Because you talked about it, right? The iso ball thing. It's such a big deal that gets the main focus when you're talking about the Raptors and how they close out games. But really, to me, the iso ball isn't necessarily just about DeMar scoring the basket. The iso ball is DeMar creating a play. And that's what he's become so much better at, that it's not just every time he gets a ball, he's trying to get his shot off. He's actually creating the best play available for the team. And, you see the development in JV's game and how well JV's doing, because DeMar, he's giving these guys just dunks, right? He'll drive to the basket, give them the little dump pass, and they just have to dunk the ball. DeMar, the evolution, the next step that this guy's taken, it's been crazy.
I know, and it's almost a shame that we're getting so many great performances individually in the league so far, because, and now there's about 20 more games to play or so, another a month or two to go in the season, and not to say that he can't, but any other year he would have been playing himself into MVP consideration. Now, I'm sure a lot of Raptors fans out there are going to kill me for saying that he's not, but I think it might be a little too late. But another year, he'd be in top 3 MVP voting, not a problem. He's definitely elevated his game, and we talked about this a little earlier on this year. DeMar DeRozan's the best Raptor of all time.
I mean, it's getting harder and harder for me to come up with a reason to say that it's still Vince Carter. Because you're talking about sustained domination that DeMar DeRozan is putting up, right? And if the Raptors maintain the 1 seed for an entire season, if they make another run in the playoffs, I mean, it's getting harder and harder to argue it. But what he did last night, I think, was the thing where you don't really have that many quote-unquote moments in DeMar DeRozan's career. You know what I mean? Like, when you go back to Vince's career, Vince had his buzzer-beater wins, Vince had, I'm not talking about dunk contests. I'm talking about, regular season moments where Vince was winning games at the buzzer. There are a bunch of those things when it's yep, Vince Carter is here. DeMar DeRozan last night, I don't know if that's the first moment, but it's definitely the biggest moment to date where you can look at something and pinpoint something and say, yep, he's here. He has arrived. He's not in that top tier of, the Steph Currys, the LeBrons, the KDs. He's not in that tier, but he's definitely making a case for being in that tier just below those guys. And he's coming, man. He's going to be a threat going forward. And the next step is do this in the playoffs. I mean, heck, do this tomorrow night. Do this I guess by the time people listen to this, do this against the Rockets, right? In those big time matchups, that's when it's going to be, that's when stars are really born, right?
Right. Now, just to play devil's advocate, I would say that DeRozan's moment was the dunk over Gobert
Ooh, yeah, that's a
before
thing.
last night.
That's a thing.
But now that's the thing, is that we don't want to fall in love with ourselves quite yet by beating the Pistons in overtime, especially when you're staring down the Rockets on a Friday night, who are riding what, a 17-game win streak now.
Yeah, it's at 17 games, and the Rockets, which we'll get to in shortly. I mean, this is a big, big test, and this is not only a test to me to I want to see how the Raptors show up. I want to see how Raptors fans show up. I want to see a hype ass crowd for this Raptors game against the Rockets because that's a big, big, big time game. You got the Raptors coming in off a high. They're rolling. They're on a good win streak themselves, but also just coming off that game with so much emotion and, the DeMar dunk and all that coming into a matchup against the odds-on favorite so far, James Harden being the MVP, and also just the Rockets being on this win streak. And they're just, so much talk before, and I don't want to jump ahead to our Rockets talk too much, but this is just a big-time matchup, and your stars are born, or your stars shine brightest. I guess that's a cliche I'm looking for, right? Your stars shine brightest in the biggest games. And head-to-head against James Harden, this is a game where, this is where Kyle and DeMar need to be Kyle and DeMar. Because as much as we talk about the bench and the strength of the Raptors being their bench going forward, the NBA period comes down to your stars. When it matters most, your stars are going to carry you.
You're right. Now, it's funny, too, we've been killing the Raptors fans the last couple of weeks. But, man, if you're going to the game on Friday, you got to get loud.
Yes.
All right? This is a serious, that better be playoff atmosphere style. I don't want any of this Bay Street nonsense of, like a Leaf game from a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be loud. You got to get into it, because this is as close to a playoff game as you're going to get in the regular season for the Raptors.
Totally. And here's the thing, the Raptors have had some games lately where, they've won against some pretty bad teams, and they kind of like squeaked by against Washington. They're in tough against the Hornets and Hawks and the Pistons. Obviously, they went to OT, but if there's a game for you to be hype about, everyone involved with the organization, it's going to be this game against the Rockets. But, part of that, the big news coming out of that win against Detroit is the Raptors' 5th straight playoff berth, right? And prior to that, they've only made the playoffs a total of 5 times in 18 seasons, right? So, like, the run that this franchise is on, I think that adds more to what you're saying about DeMar being the best ever, because he's at the forefront of that, right? Their 5th straight playoff berth, and they haven't lost a regulation game since February 1st.
Yeah, I saw that stat. That's crazy.
The run they're on now, it's so good. But let's go back to the game a little bit. The game against the Pistons. Because DeMar DeRozan down the stretch, okay? We talked about it. Big play after big play, but also
the fourth quarter was unbelievable. I saw like a recap on Twitter of all the points in overtime and the fourth quarter.
It was so
he was getting everything he wanted.
He couldn't be stopped, right? And like it was so bad. I felt bad for who was it? Tolliver, because well, here's the thing, right? Like, first off, Blake Griffin, I don't know what he was doing on that final play, but
yikes.
A dude should not be able to go with the game on the line. You're up 1. You should not be able to go coast to coast and dunk the ball, right? Like, Blake Griffin, I have no idea what he was doing on that final play. And Tolliver got postered, but at least he was trying to do something, right? He was like the one Pistons player that at least tried to play some type of defense between DeMar DeRozan and the go-ahead basket with seconds left on the clock, right? Like, that was just a crazy, crazy last-second play, and I've never seen anything like that. But the one thing, how was DeMar so calm and cool after he got that dunk, which is probably the biggest dunk of his career, right? Like, he was so calm and cool and chill. It was like Lowry was the one losing his mind.
That's just his demeanor.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of always been like that. He's not been one to get, like, real hyped up and, like, go crazy like that. That's just, he's kind of a, I hate to say this as it's a negative, but kind of a boring personality when it comes to things like that. He's not going to be showboating and dancing around and things like that. He's just going to kind of give you the the gas face afterwards. Might give you a little snarl, but other than that, it's Kyle who's really the one who shows the emotion on his face and on his sleeve afterwards.
Oh yeah. And like switching gears a little bit to the Pistons, that last second play that DeMar got, like shout out to DeMar for making that play and going up and knowing that he had to dunk it. But what are the Pistons and Blake Griffin like? He looked lost on D at certain points. He was hitting big shots, but to me, he showed the difference between guys who get good stats and people who are winners. Like Blake Griffin was hitting like big time shots, but then on the defensive end, he was pretty much non-existent.
Yeah,
it was very
out.
Weird. Like that team, I was going to say that team, I know why they had to make that trade, but it is not looking good for them at all right now.
Right. Now, it's funny because somebody on Twitter brought up a good point when you bring up this last second play that maybe the reason that the Detroit looked so out of sorts there on defense was that because Kyle Lowry got away with something.
Right? It was so funny. And I'm still waiting. I tweeted it earlier today, I think it was, right? And it was so funny because Raptors fans, we talk about it on this podcast all the time. Raptors fans are so quick to point out and I think a lot of it has to do with the local broadcast kind of.
I was going to say that's not just the fans, that's the people who cover the team too.
Yeah, I think like it gives them it makes Raptors fans feel as if the refs are against them when meanwhile, if you pay attention to headlines around the league, every single team is complaining about the refs basically every single night from the top down, whether you're LeBron or whether you're the Brooklyn Nets, right? It seems everyone's mad. But I did find it funny, and I tweeted this earlier on, to which a group chat kind of started throwing shade at me later on in the day. But I tweeted, I like fun things, so I'm glad they didn't call it. But I do find it funny how I haven't seen any Raptors fans or media who normally love calling out the refs, but I haven't seen them bring up Lowry's quote-unquote pick that he said on DeMar's epic dunk. Funny how y'all seem to be okay with that missed call, though. Right?
Well, it doesn't fit in with the narrative of it's Raptors against everybody else in the world and the referees and everything, But listen, you don't win Sports Analyst of the Year 2 years in a row, I guess, by being truthful about what's going on with the team. Hint, 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 hint.
You just got to be, you got to be for the home crowd, right? You got to be for the home fans. I get it. I understand it. I get the shtick, I get the shtick. You know what's funny, though? This matchup here with the Rockets, okay? So the Raptors won the first matchup earlier this season, but we know that the Rockets were without CP3. Okay, right. So the Rockets now, as we know, they haven't lost since January 26th. But how do you think the Raptors match up with the Rockets at full strength? It's
tough, right? I think that the Rockets match up pretty well size-wise.
Yeah.
When you talk about 3-and-D and the kind of athletes they put on the floor with their starting unit, I'd give the Rockets a little bit of an edge. I think what was the stat that we had the other day? It was that when Capella, Harden, and Paul all play.
Yeah, they're 34-1 this season when they all play.
Right. So, that's a big three that you can't really argue with. Now, Capella and JV, that's kind of a wash. Those are two really good big guys that are playing up to the utmost of their capabilities right now. Now, the interesting thing is to see, who does Harden take? Does he take Norm?
Yeah,
because you got to figure that Ariza is going to take DeRozan, and Chris Paul is going to take Lowry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch, and it'll be interesting to see as well because people recently have been talking about James Harden. Even you've talked about it, right? How
he's been improved. A lot better defensively.
Yeah, he's been a lot more improved defensively, and same goes for DeRozan too on the low. DeRozan. Of course. I've talked about it before that DeRozan's strength was just scoring buckets. That basically was all he did, and he has become a much better defender along with his improved playmaking. So this will be a good matchup, right? The two buddies, two LA guys going at it. It'll be good to watch DeMar and James Harden possibly go at it. I'm definitely looking forward to this matchup. And
now the other one too are the bench units because Houston has a pretty good bench.
Oh yeah.
With the reigning sixth man of the year,
Yeah.
and former Raptor PJ Tucker.
Yeah, Eric Gordon and PJ Tucker coming off that bench are two pretty solid guys. Also, I'm not sure if Joe Johnson's going to be in the lineup. He was their deadline, or what's it called?
Right.
Waiver line, waiver pickup that they got. Joe Johnson will add another grown up to that team. Another option down the stretch. But not sure if he's healthy. But we'll see how that works out. But yeah, they've added some depth to that team as well. That'll be a really tough matchup. And the problem is, here's the real test, because we talked about the Raptors changing their offense, right? And it's a fast pace, but also shooting a lot of threes. I mean, this is the team that the model is essentially built after, right? Like literally, we talked about it before on one of our earlier podcasts, right? How one of the Raptors assistant coaches used to be with the Houston Rockets. And what they did at the time in that organization is they tried out this whole layups and threes thing with their D-League team first. And it worked down there. They got to D-League championship and won. And then they brought that up to their main team. And now you see the Rockets team in the way that they play now. But it was all developed by someone who's now an assistant with the Raptors. So it's interesting to see kind of like, is this master versus a teacher? Teacher versus a student. That's a cliche I'm looking for. I'm messing up my cliches tonight. What's going on with me, Webby? But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes, because we know what the Rockets can do, and that's what they do night in, night out. And the Raptors have done that to date, but can they do that against the Rockets? This is a big matchup. I can't wait for it.
Oh, it's awesome. Now, what do you think about the Normissance that happened against the Pistons as well? Do you think that this is kind of the start of a sustained Norm Powell comeback here?
I mean, if it doesn't happen now, this is a big chance for Norm. OG's down with an injury. They started Malcolm Miller ahead of you. If that didn't motivate you as Norman Powell,
definitely a kick in the ass to Norm.
Yeah, that's got to be, right? Like, they're bringing this guy off the D-League team, which I know Norm is a hardworking guy. Obviously, a second-round pick. He's worked for everything he got as well. But, that had to be a shot to the ego that they just brought in Malcolm Miller and then they signed your boy Nigel Hayes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're bringing in all these other options to kind of tell Norm, listen, all we need is someone to play defense and hit threes. We need the bare minimum definition of a 3-and-D guy, right? And OG's kind of struggled lately, and obviously now he's hurt, out with an injury, but maybe Norm did need that kick in the ass because he played really well in that Pistons game.
Yeah, he looked confident.
He looked confident. It was the first time we've seen that in a while. And they definitely need production from that 3 spot if the Raptors are to make a run deep into the playoffs. And you know what? It's funny what one game will do, one big-time game on ESPN will do, because if you looked around most of the shows today on Thursday, leading PTI, the TNT guys, Barkley and Chuck, were both talking about...
I think Barkley said that the Raptors are going to win the East.
Yeah, both were saying the Raptors... Kenny and Chuck were saying the Raptors are going to the finals. The Raptors were the lead on all those shows on ESPN, highly questionable, on PTI. Like, all those shows were leading with the Raptors. So it's funny what one big-time game on ESPN will do, but now you gotta live up to the expectations. You got to be consistent with it, right?
Yeah, I can't wait. Friday night. Let's get it going.
Friday night. Big-time game. And the other thing, too, about last night was, I know you were asleep for this for sure, Webby. I caught it on PVR late night. But the Cavs, LeBron did LeBron James things.
Whoa,
last night.
I saw the numbers.
Oh, just a dominating fourth quarter by LeBron James in Denver. And it was a tough game. They were going back and forth. And basically LeBron was just like, we're not losing this game. I think he hit like the last 9 points of the game, I think he had. And they were just tough fadeaway baskets that if anyone else is shooting that, you're saying that's a horrible shot. I mean, even if LeBron takes it, especially the last one, it was like a fading one-footed, right? A fadeaway off 1 foot into the corner, and he just splashed it to ice the game. I mean,
nasty.
Can't wait for the playoffs.
How about Larry Nance in that starting lineup?
Okay, so here's the thing, right? Larry Nance, right away when this trade happened, The tapes are there. The receipts are there.
The receipts are there.
The receipts are there. We sat here talking about how Larry Nance was a very key pickup. And the fact that he was so athletic and he could hit, a mid-range jumper. You give that to LeBron James, he is going to explode. And Larry Nance, Tristan, I don't know what kind of season, what's really going on with Tristan Thompson.
Well, it's the Kardashian curse, for sure.
Right?
No doubt. You got to get those ladies out of your life.
Hey, we were talking about it the other day, and I said, I love The Life of Pablo. I think it's a really dope album, but there were parts on it that I thought could have been a little bit better. And it made me think, with all this Kardashian curse talk, like, is Kanye that good that he could still come up with Pablo, but we're left thinking, wait a second, how much doper would Pablo have been without Kim?
Wow.
Just things to make you think about, because Pablo's already dope, but just things to make you go,
Wow, that is a hot take.
Those are just the things that we try to bring up here on the Ball on Blast podcast, right? But getting back to the Cavs for a second, right? You're mind blown right now. You're really thinking about it, right?
Well, like, Pablo's already one of my favorite Kanye albums of all time.
Hey, I'm just saying. Hey, all I can say is Tristan Thompson's averaging like 6 and 6 this year, and he's been injured twice this season, and he's now hurt again. And even when he gets healthy, and if Kevin Love's back, how is Tristan playing?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right?
I don't even know where he fits in kind of in the second unit either.
Oh, it's just a crazy time right now in the NBA. I can't wait for the playoffs because whatever the matchups are on both sides, it's going to be a lot of fun.